900 médecins se sont réunis à Paris sous la présidence du professeur Pasteur Valéry Radot. Parmi eux, le professeur Portier, qui voici 50 ans, découvrit les phénomènes fondamentaux d'une affection aujourd'hui à la mode sous le nom d'allergie. On la connaissait depuis longtemps sous d'autres noms. L'asthme, allergie. L'eczéma, allergie. Le rhume des foins, allergie. Elle peut avoir des causes professionnelles, mais on peut aussi être allergique aux poussières, aux poils de chat, aux plumes, au pollen ou simplement à la lessive. L'allergie sera-t-elle bientôt définitivement vaincue?
"50 years after this documentary was made, allergies are soaring. A modern plague of allergic diseases is sweeping the globe. If present trends remained unchecked, 50% of all Europeans will soon be suffering from allergy. Why has allergy grown to epidemic proportions? Symptoms may go from a mild hay fever to potentially deadly reactions. How come people are dying just by eating harmless specks of peanuts? Why are more and more of us becoming allergic to basic elements of life, such as pollen or food? Allergy makes no sense from the point of view of our survival. Allergens too are multiplying, the list going as far as to include water, semen or sunshine. A growing breach seems to be opening up between humankind and nature. What does it mean? An allergy sufferer myself, I try to make sense of it all. As my days go on, shaped by medications that only switch symptoms off and with no cure in sight, like millions of other allergic patients, I start to wonder, how can wholly harmless elements cause such a serious chronic disease? To unravel these mysteries, I decide to seek help from some of the world's top scientists who, at the forefront of allergy research, are pushing the boundaries of what is known about this malady and its secret bond with modern society. Allergy virtually didn't exist outside the industrial West. But allergy is now marching into developing countries too, as they embrace Western lifestyles. Seasonal pollen counts are rising. The number of anaphylaxis cases is growing. We live in an allergy-prone world. Allergy is an attack of a person's immune system on apparently harmless elements in the environment that our body's defenses regard as a threat to our health. Why is that? Professor Ruslan Medzitov of Yale University has a 360-degree view of allergy. He begins by explaining the classic theory that tries to make sense of this weird malady, the hygiene hypothesis.
From the beginning of last century, when allergy had been recognized, it was noticed that it primarily affected people who were wealthy, people who had better access to hygiene products, better housing conditions, sanitation, and so forth. For example, in industrialized countries, people have access to clean water. The incidence of parasitic infections is close to zero. And that is not a very natural state for us. It's a good state, but not natural, because naturally, practically all animals, including our ancestors, have been always exposed to parasitic infections, and there are some consequences to that. And these consequences include some aspects of dysregulation of the immune system, that the immune system now reacts differently than it supposed to or that it's meant to. It doesn't mean that we should start infecting children deliberately, of course, but what it simply means is that the immune system evolved to deal with this level of exposure to infections, and when we don't have it, it starts behaving inappropriately.
According to this classic theory of the causes of allergy, more and more people are becoming allergic because they are failing to adapt to a too rapidly changing environment, which has supposedly become too clean. Is this enough to explain the ongoing allergy epidemic? Allergy exists in nature. It's not only the product of our society, but allergy sufferers, which were very rare in the late 19th century, have seen their ranks rise constantly in developed countries. Already 1 in 30 people in the 1930s and 40s, they are 1 in 3 or more at the dawn of the new millennium. What is there in modern environment that makes so many people allergic? Dr. Tradel Hoffmann of the Institute of Environmental Medicine in Munich has long been trying to solve the riddle of the mysterious link between allergy and our lifestyle. Her studies have zeroed in on a precise culprit in modern environment: air pollution.
Man spricht einmal davon, dass die Umwelt direkt auf das Individuum wirkt. Wir wissen einige Substanzen, wie zum Beispiel flüchtige organische Substanzen oder auch Dieselpartikel, die einen direkten Einfluss auf das Immunsystem haben und die das Immunsystem empfänglicher machen für die Entwicklung von Allergien. Also Umwelt direkt auf den Menschen. Dann haben wir aber auch den Weg von der Umwelt über den Allergenträger auf den Menschen, weil die Umweltschadstoffe oder auch kürzlich konnten wir erst zeigen, dass Ozon ein Faktor ist, der die Allergenität der Pollen erhöht.
I've always wondered how all that dirty air we breathe in all the time impacts our bodies. I finally got an answer. Traffic pollution acts both on the immune system, making it more prone to allergic diseases, and on pollen itself, making it more allergenic. Pollen is no longer the good old pollen that made life on Earth possible. Rather, it's a kind of evil urban creature born of an unnatural union between air pollutants and pollen.
Was wir gesehen haben, ist, dass die Allergien ganz schnell angestiegen sind. Und an dem Punkt haben sich Forscher überlegt, wie kann das sein, dass es so schnell ansteigt? Weil wir eigentlich immer dachten, dass genetische Veränderungen eine wichtige Rolle spielen. Aber das war der Punkt, an dem die Genetik ein Stück in den Hintergrund gerückt ist und man gesagt hat, so schnell können Gene sich nicht verändern. Und da kam wirklich die Umwelt und der Einfluss von der Umwelt nach vorne und die Wichtigkeit der Umwelt.
Genes cannot explain the rise of allergy trends in our times, which has put scientists on the tracks of traffic pollution. Due to climate change, there is more pollen in the air, and for a longer period of time. So climate change is also one of the factors at play, due to higher levels of CO2 in the air. On the other side of the world, more cutting-edge research is underway on how air pollution can affect the immune system. Dr. Karin Ado of Stanford University, a leading researcher in the field of allergy and a recovered asthma patient.
When I was a child, I had very bad asthma and allergies. I was born and I was raised in an area of the country near Newark, New Jersey. It's very near New York City, and in those days there was a lot of pollution there. So when I got out of the area with high levels of pollution, my asthma got much, much better. So I think that it's because of that, but that's just one case. But it does allow me to draw up some more questions about how environment affects asthma and allergies. I work with a group at University of California, San Francisco, and they have a group in Fresno. The Central Valley in California is where we grow a lot of our products, but unfortunately, it's both air pollution and pesticides. Any one person, of course, is exposed to all of these things at once. And we need to be very careful because the immune system is very sensitive in the very early stages of life, in utero, especially during pregnancy. And so if the air pollution is truly affecting the immune system, then that could be the reason why people are having associations with allergies and asthma and autoimmune disease. Right now, our studies have shown that it looks like when it does affect the immune system, it affects it at the DNA level. So we're also going to be studying how that DNA is affected over time, because we want to see whether or not exposure to air pollution is something that's reversible or irreversible. And it's important to know that for health policy issues as well.
Hence, pollution from pesticides and traffic is a toxic cocktail that makes us allergic and may even affect our DNA. But I've discovered another interesting study on the possible link between pesticides and allergy.
Westernized lifestyle is also associated with more industrial pollution, as we know, including pesticides. And some researchers already found this link between allergies and pesticides. For example, there were publications on allergic rhinitis and asthma from United States agricultural study. And they found some link between these pesticides and allergies.
Pesticides make their way into us through different routes. They can be breathed in or ingested. Dr. Gershaw has delved into this second route.
We wanted to see if not just any pesticides, but pesticides with a strong antibacterial effect would make sense to examine. We wanted to kind of link it to the hygiene hypothesis. So we wanted to see if that's actually true in case of pesticides with antibacterial effect and allergic sensitization.
Pesticides act differently from one another. Dichlorophenols are chemicals used in pesticides that not only kill pests on crops, but may kill the good bacteria inside us.
It was 2,000-something people, yeah, and 95 and above % of it had dichlorophenols in urine. We found that people who had higher dichlorophenol levels were about 80% likely to have sensitization to foods. When we looked into sources, we found out they can be found in air, water, and food.
And pesticides are just one of the many offenders we encounter in our very disinfected daily life.
People need to make sure that they don't have too many antibiotics or too many sanitizing situations. And of course, if you need medicines to treat a disease, you need to use them. But we do need to be careful about all the different interactions of the environment with our gut and with the microbiota, because there is a lot of evidence now that perhaps the hygiene hypothesis is leading to allergies or asthma. There's studies now going on to understand that. There was a study published on a detergent called triclarsan in toothpaste and in hand washes, and they found that it was more associated with food allergy.
Because bacteria make us digest food.
Natural bacteria in our gut prevent us from having the bad bacteria come in. So they help us digest food, but they also prevent the bad bacteria coming in and taking over our gut. So it's a very delicate balance.
So, there seems to be more than a grain of truth to the hygiene hypothesis, the theory that claims that children who grow up in a sterilized environment like ours can develop a failing immune system. Yet my investigation's unveiling that it applies even more to our internal environment, our body. Not only do we not live close to the soil anymore, where in each gram there are 40 million bacterial cells, we drink, eat, and apply antibacterial agents, killing the bacteria that make correct food digestion and metabolism possible, and setting the stage for allergy to show up. Exposure to too many antibacterial products turns out to be toxic to our immune system. But on the web, I tracked down a lecture by an American scientist that alarmingly expands the number of toxic chemicals we may encounter in our daily life.
It looks like science fiction. Thousands and thousands of animals in cages exposed to thousands of chemicals for a long time. And you could say, well, this is just fantasy, but I propose to you that this is an experiment that we have all been taking part in without our permission since the 1950s with increasing numbers of chemicals.
Dr. Shana Swan, one of the world's top researchers on a class of hazardous chemicals that is pervasive in the environment, can help me clarify my ideas about the toxic threats we are exposed to.
We are the guinea pigs that are trying out these chemicals. So how are we exposed? We get a lot of chemicals at once. We get them in a kind of steady state if they're in our walls and furniture and food and air. That's pretty steady state. And we get them in many ways. So we eat them, we drink them, we breathe them, we get them in our skin. The toxicology of these different routes of entry into the body are different, but they're not tested.
Exposed to thousands of chemicals that have never been tested for safety? This is nightmarish. And does this test we are all taking part in have anything to do with this allergy pandemic? Dr. Swan collaborates with a Swedish scientist who's found a link between allergy and a class of highly toxic chemicals. Right now, he's on a research visit to New York.
15 years back, I was most interested in microbiological exposures. And we did a very large study and were searching for evidence that mold will give rise to asthma and allergy in children. And we didn't find anything at all, to be honest. But instead, we did find that chemicals may matter. We find that phthalates from soft PVC could be related to allergy diseases in children. And from that point, we have been focusing on, instead, on chemicals. One of the compounds we are looking for is phthalates. Mm-hmm. Phthalates can be found in soft PVC. Soft PVC can be used as building materials, toys, everywhere where you have a soft plastic. We have phenols like bisphenol A, which can be found in plastics as hard plastics, but it can also be found in many other sources as the phthalates. You can find them in cosmetics, you can find them in cleaning products, you can find them in packages, you can find them. That's the new thing with many of these compounds, that they are found in so many sources.
Phthalates and bisphenol A, or BPA, are chemicals that make plastic soft or hard and personal care products more foamy or smooth. Hundreds of thousands of tons have been used by the industry to produce countless plastic and other consumables. Even though their action as endocrine disruptors is being proven, the industry keeps using them as existing safe alternatives are more expensive.
Another characteristic of these endocrine disruptors is they're not usually specific for one particular disease or endpoints. They're quite, important for many systems in the body.
Endocrine disruptors are hazardous chemicals that from consumables make their way into our body. And by cheating it into thinking that they are natural hormones, the body messengers that regulate all our organs, they manage to take their place and send out wrong messages. The consequence of their action is devastating.
Something have happened during the last decades. It's the same for asthma and allergy. It's the same for several neurodevelopmental disorders like behavior, ADHD, autism, that something have happened with the population, and this can't be explained by genital reasons. The only thing that is possible to explain this with is that there have been changes in the environment. And these changes can be of many different origin, of course, but one track here, one hypothesis here is that exposure in early life for these kind of chemicals could give rise to these things later on in life.
Why did you hang that beautiful painting on the wall?
Well, it's beautiful, and also it's a symbol of the pregnant woman, which is what I study, and she's exposed and vulnerable, and I like to remember that vulnerability of her and her fetus. Let's back up and talk about the genome, which is like the score of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It's what's written in code, hard code, and then there is how you play the symphony. And if you make marks on the code by maybe putting some lines through and making some indications on the score, which you can see from a conductor score, you see it changes how he plays it out. Okay? These changes are like the epigenetic marks, and the epigenome is what plays out. So the epigenetic changes are changes to the hard code made by the environment.
But the basic structure is still there.
Yes.
It's just the way you express it. And even more good with that picture was that you can make your marks with a pencil, or you can make it with an ink pen. And the pencil you can use a rubber gum and go back. But if you do it by an ink, then it's there forever. So it's a programming. We are very concerned about that. Things happening very, very early in life can be like the ink.
To sum up, our genetic code is like a recorded tape. These powerful synthetic chemicals may cover some parts of it. As a result, important pieces of information from our genes cannot be read anymore or are read incorrectly. But what are the chemicals of greatest concern, and how do they get into our body?
I study mostly phthalates and to some extent bisphenol A, and these are plasticizers. These are found in plastics. And that sounds like a small class, but it's actually huge, huge class. It's in our food. We know we get it through food. That's odd because we're not knowingly eating it. How does it get there? We know that tubing conveys DEHP. Well, if you think about food being processed through tubes in the processing plant, okay, picking up DEHP.
A lot of studies have been done on these compounds, and they found out that a lot of packaging materials were actually the culprits. Apparently they're using dichlorophenyls or some chlorinated phenols in production of paper and woods. I think that's how it comes into packaging materials.
There's a way consumers can know what kind of plastic their food is packaged with, and where the industry has used the worst phthalates and bisphenol A. It is through the recycling codes.
Number 1 is recommended here. Yeah. What you should avoid is PVC number 3, 6, and 7. You see that triangle there?
So this helps.
Yeah. It gives you some kind of information at least.
If you look at the recycling code on the bottom of the bottle, number, that tells you quite a lot. And I usually say this little poem, which goes like this: 4, 5, 1, and 2. All the rest are bad for you. So you can remember that, right? 4, 5, 1, and 2, all the rest are bad for you. But a colleague in Germany has recently published that even 4, 5, 1, and 2, water stored in there has some estrogenic activity.
PET plastic has always been regarded as safe and is the most common one used in the processing and packaging of our water, drinks, and food. It's everywhere in our food chain. When so many toxic chemicals end up in processed food, let alone the hundreds of additives that are used in food processing, is it a wonder that food allergies are soaring?
We need to get ahead of this disease. We think that it's doubling in numbers every 10 years. And the rate of rise of food allergy diagnosis is increasing so that it's worrisome that it's being called an epidemic, for example. So we need to understand what's causing it and how to prevent it.
Dr. Rao, director of the Paracelsus Clinic, is a holistic clinician internationally known for successfully healing patients from chronic diseases. He believes that hidden food allergies could even be the cause of all the other allergies. How can it be?
Die Basisallergie in über 90% ist eine nicht erkannte oder nicht symptomatische Nahrungsmittelallergie. Diese Patientin hatte so starke Allergien, dass sie sogar Asthma hatte, ausgeprägtes Asthma. Man hat ihr dann gesagt, ja, die Spezialisten, sie haben eine Allergie gegen Katzenhaare, gegen Heustaub, gegen Pollen. Und man hat dann Antihistamin gegeben. Woher kommt denn eigentlich das Histamin? Das Histamin wird im Darm produziert, in der Darmschleimhaut. Wenn die Darmflora vermindert ist, dann steigt das Histamin. Und das sind, wie gesagt, die Nahrungsmittelallergien. Schauen Sie diese Patientin an. Sie hatte ganz viele allergische Reaktionen auf diverseste Nahrungsmittelbestandteile. Da haben wir hier zum Beispiel Dinkel, Kuhmilch und so weiter. Dann sehen wir unten Casein. Durch Umstellung der Nahrung haben wir eine deutliche Verbesserung erleben können. Sie sehen, die Ursachen sind tiefer, sind toxisch, sind im Darm, ob sie Allergien haben oder Asthma.
They also test patients to detect the presence inside their bodies of common environmental pollutants.
Es ist ungeheuerlich, wie die Schwermetallbelastung zugenommen hat. Wir sehen Aluminium, wir sehen Arsen, wir sehen Quecksilber. So hoch, dass es weit im toxischen Bereich ist. Das sind alles Metalle, toxische Metalle, welche die Schleimhäute reizen können und das Immunsystem vermindern können.
What do you think is the reason for the ongoing allergy epidemic?
Die menschliche Darmflora, die Darmbakterien, werden heutzutage, vor allem bei Kindern, systematisch zerstört. Die Darmflora wird durch Chlorinisierung des Wassers gestört. Sie wird durch Konservierungsmittel in der Nahrung zerstört. Sie wird zerstört auch durch die Antibiotika. Nun, dazu kommt noch, dass der Mensch heute durch Ernährung, Umstellung in den letzten Jahrzehnten eine ganz beträchtlich verminderte Spurenelementzufuhr hat. Zum Beispiel Zink ist heute bei unseren Patienten etwa ein Viertel dessen, was die Menschen 1950 hatten. Zink ist sozusagen der Gegenspieler zum Histamin, welches Allergien erzeugen kann.
I've discovered that a biodynamic urban farm has settled down right inside my city's hugest park, where you buy what they have just picked from their fields. They're carrying out a research project with the University of Bologna to check whether old varieties of wheat have a higher nutritional value than modern varieties.
Qua abbiamo la coltivazione dei grani antichi che usiamo per fare il pane. Sono coltivazioni fatte in armonia con i cicli naturali, con le stagioni, col sole, la luna, i pianeti, con l'amore per la terra. Questi grani non hanno esigenze di concimazioni come i grani moderni. Sono grani che sono sempre stati nutriti da quello che ci rimaneva dalle coltivazioni precedenti. Ci sono tutta una serie di sostanze che non sono più presenti nei grani moderni. Le nuove varietà sono state scelte per essere concimate con la chimica, per essere difese con la chimica sia dai parassiti che dalle erbe infestanti. Per cui tutte queste sostanze non ne hanno più bisogno e non le sintetizzano più.
Certo.
Ma producono tanto di più, per cui tutta l'energia della pianta va a fare una massa di amido e di proteine che però quel tipo di proteine che diventano componenti del glutine fanno male.
Capito, e qui, da lì tutte queste allergie al
E da lì
glutine.
tutte le allergie al glutine.
Our immune system is really under attack from a plethora of environmental sources. Thus, Dr. Medzitov is developing a revolutionary theory that may show that allergy is not only pathological, but may be a biological response to just that attack.
The idea is that allergic reactions are not purely a pathology. It's not purely the immune system being mistargeted towards innocuous environmental factors, but rather that allergic reactions represent an important form of biological defense. The rest of the immune system defends us against pathogens, viruses, bacteria, and so forth. But allergic reactions, which is a type of immune response, we think defends us from environmental factors that are not microbial in nature, but rather represent a variety of chemicals, noxious substances, venoms, and a variety of environmental toxins and pollutants. And these can be just as bad for our health and just as an infection can be, and therefore the idea is that the immune system evolved to provide protection. And the way it protects us from these challenges is through allergic reactions.
How allergy succeeds in defending us?
Well, the nature of allergic reactions is to expel something from the body and to prevent something getting into the body. So all the symptoms of allergic diseases, which includes running nose, tears, sneezing, coughing, vomiting, itching, all of these reactions, what they have in common is that they're all designed to get something out of the body. So there are these two components of allergic defenses. And the first component has to do with avoidance. Evolutionarily, allergic reactions evolved to make us avoid unfavorable environments that are in some way are not optimal for us. These avoidance reactions initially evolved in a very different environment where you can easily change the environment. You go from one part of the forest to another, you go from one cave to another, and you avoid that. But in modern environment, there are some aspects that we can avoid. We really need to understand if these reactions provide some benefit for us and what might be the long-term consequences. What I'm saying is that some aspects of allergy may provide the protection in the long term that we don't yet understand. And we know, for example, that allergic people have lower incidence of certain types of cancers, the cancers that are caused by environmental exposures.
Dr. Medzitov's view of allergy turns the hygiene hypothesis upside down and fits perfectly with what my investigation has unveiled. Even if allergy may be pathological, it may as well be an attempt of our immune system to protect us from a world that has not become cleaner, but toxic. We are stuck in an unfavorable environment. Environmental toxic chemicals are emerging as the allergy sufferer's #1 enemy. We have to know exactly where they are to be able to avoid them. Elizabeth Salter Green, the author of a revealing book and a former consultant for the chemicals programme of WWF UK, has recently moved from London to a village in Somerset. Now she's taking me to a friend's house to see all the toxic stuff that's found in an average home.
I think quite often the internal environment can be as polluted as a busy street in London. For example, in a room like this, there will be a high proportion of flame retardants put into soft furnishings. I think the fact that they're very synthetic foams inside does lead them to be more combustible, and if they had more natural fibres inside them, the degree of flame retardant required could be less The electronic products, as I've already mentioned, have flame retardants in them, but also the plastic housing might be made of bisphenol A, another known hormone-disrupting chemical. More of what one finds in sitting rooms, really. I think the flame retardants are probably the greatest concerns in bedrooms, in the fitted carpets, in the bedding itself, and then in children's sleepwear. I think already in the kitchen, even though one is trying to eat a healthy diet full of fruit and vegetables, lots of fibre, there will be an inherent problem of the cocktail of pesticides to which we're all exposed. Certainly, tin cans tend to have a lining of bisphenol A, and if it tends to be an acidic product, the bisphenol A lining is more inclined to leach out of the product and go into the food, and then, of course, one eats it. Storage products that are used in the kitchen, they have in the past been made of bisphenol A. They still might be today. Again, there's commercial confidentiality, so one can't always tell if something is made of bisphenol A, which is of concern. But if it has a recycling symbol with a number 7 in it, then it is highly likely to be made of bisphenol A. And then another area within the kitchen that is of concern is the non-stick cookware that we have these days. Again, these are the perfluorinated chemicals. And I think there are quite a few chemicals of concern in cosmetics. There are parabens, which are preservatives, that are known hormone disruptors. Perfumes are, again, a concern.
This is a really big problem because general people, it's not easy to select what kind of products you are going to use because you don't have the full information, and the information are so complicated.
As phthalates and bisphenol A in plastics and cosmetics are not on the label, even the most informed consumer cannot avoid them. For the first time in history, the human body has a toxic body load.
Well, there are 80,000 plus chemicals in commerce. Not all of them are high-volume chemicals, and not all of them are toxic. But very few of them have been tested. Do they cancel each other out? Do they reinforce each other? Do they add up to something much worse?
And another problem with this is that there is an old saying from several hundred years back that it's the dose that make the poison, meaning that the more you expose for something, the more toxic effect in the population you can see. But for these kind of compounds, maybe the dose doesn't matter. It's more about the timing. So if you expose in exactly the right time window when something is happening with the fetus, then you have a hit and something happens.
So, the very foundation of the regulation of chemicals that should protect us is flawed, unsuited to tackle the dual threat of hormone disruptors and the chemical cocktail to which we are all exposed. The issue of the health risks of chemical pollution was proposed to the institutions 10 years ago by a historical declaration, the Paris Appeal. Its proponent is Professor Belpomme.
L'Appel de Paris a été proclamé en 2004. C'est une déclaration internationale qui a une valeur historique puisqu'elle a été signée par l'ensemble des conseils de l'ordre des médecins en Europe, par 300 000 citoyens européens et par plusieurs milliers de scientifiques dans le monde, y compris plusieurs prix Nobel. Cet appel avait 3 articles fondamentaux. Article 1, un grand nombre de nos maladies sont liées à la pollution chimique. Article 2, l'enfance est en danger à cause de cette pollution, car il est le plus vulnérable de la société. Article 3, si nous continuons à polluer notre environnement comme nous le faisons aujourd'hui, c'est l'espèce humaine elle-même qui se met en danger.
The Paris Appeal has certainly played a major role in raising greater awareness of the terrible chemical threat coming from the environment. REACH, the innovative European legislation on chemicals that came into force in 2007, was supposed to increase the protection of European citizens' health.
REACH is to ensure the protection of human health and the environment. One of the groundbreaking elements of REACH is that it very clearly identifies the responsibility of the registrants, of the people who manufacture or import chemicals, that they need to put together a dossier that shows, on the one hand, the hazards of the substance, and on the other hand, how it is used and how it can then be safely used, although the chemical may be hazardous. So all that information is then moved to the agency. And within the agency, we then evaluate, that's the E in REACH, the information to see if it is compliant. If we have substances where we have concerns, then there's also a possibility that we say as member states and an agency, well, this is a substance that the use has to be restricted.
What's being done about phthalates and BPA? They are the substances of greatest concern around the world.
There are many substances where we do have some concerns, but if you look at the total universe of substance, we can use quite a lot quite safely. We have in that context already from the previous legislation a certain restriction on phthalates to be used in teethers, so the things that children suck on.
What other compounds have you recently restricted?
The compounds that we have restricted.
BPA?
Good question. Now, on the BPA, we are in the process of, we are reviewing the classification and labeling of the substance.
But there are already hundreds of studies on phthalates and bisphenol A. Of course, they affect our endocrine system. So it's
in the regulatory environment, there are not, let's say, agreed criteria yet on what information is sufficient to indicate that a substance is an endocrine disruptor. That discussion is ongoing.
Why the agency don't ask the producer to put phthalates and BPA on the labels? Why not? Why should that information be kept from the consumer?
That is because the agency does not have received the mandate from the member states and from the Commission to do this. But not necessarily all consumers are not necessarily interested in that information.
Il y a un déni de la part des hommes politiques qui privilégient les intérêts économiques à court terme et qui laissent tomber la santé sans se rendre compte que la facture sanitaire s'alourdit de jour en jour dans le monde, tout simplement parce que la dégradation physique, chimique et biologique de notre environnement persiste dans le temps. Voilà, donc si vous voulez, il est clair que aujourd'hui, il y a un divorce entre, d'une part, le message scientifique reconnu au niveau international et par l'ensemble de la communauté médico-scientifique et les acteurs et les décisions qui sont prises au plan politique où on ne veut pas voir la réalité en face.
This is really shocking. We live seemingly comfortable lives, pampered with thousands of objects, but awash in a sea of dangerous chemicals. As citizens, we take for granted that products on sale are safe, that there's somebody out there watching over our health. Instead, while they take years to evaluate one product that hundreds of studies worldwide have proven dangerous, people keep suffering and dying. If the institutions don't do what they should for people's safety, is there anything we can do? The first rule all allergy sufferers must follow to get better is to embrace avoidance of their allergens. At home, that often means waging war on dust mites. Fitted carpets and fabric furniture are, alas, a mite's idea of paradise. But now we know that they harbour all kinds of airborne chemicals and toxic dirt, off-gassed by indoor consumables that are allergenic too. So by eliminating them, we kill two birds with one stone.
It's very important to certainly have good air circulation flow in all one's rooms so that off-gassing of chemicals is dispersed as well. And I think where you get dust, try and remove it with either a vacuum cleaner or a damp cloth so that you are actually removing the dust away, because it's the dust that has the phthalates or the flame retardants in it.
What are the safe alternatives to all these things that you talked us
Yes.
about?
Well, we absolutely minimise plastic packaging. We don't store in plastic. We try and store in natural products. We have no non-stick ware at all. And we do try and eat as much organic as possible. Eating lower in the food chain, eating less meat and eating less highly packaged, highly processed food, I think is a much healthier way to go.
Ich war selber ein gutes Beispiel. Bis um die 30 herum hatte ich regelmäßig Cortison und Antihistaminika nehmen müssen. Vermeintlich, weil ich ein allergischer Asthmatiker war. Durch Aufbau meiner Darmflora, durch Meiden der Nahrungsmittelallergene bin ich vollkommen gesund geworden. Ich behandle heute mein Asthma nicht mehr. Ich habe gar kein Asthma mehr. Und sehen Sie mal, dies ist mein Motorrad. Damit fahre ich am liebsten an einem schönen, windigen Junitag. Wenn die ganze Luft voll Pollen ist, fahre ich durch die Gegend.
If you were able to eat unprocessed foods and not packaged foods and not transported foods, in other words, local, organic, that you would minimize a lot of exposure.
But in fact, we as consumers have a lot of power in our hands. The power to purchase and reward the good products.
La vita ha dei ritmi e delle esigenze che non sono quelle dell'artificiale, della chimica. E poi noi siamo un organismo che pensa, che non ha solo bisogno di energia e di stare bene da un punto di vista fisico, ma dobbiamo formulare dei pensieri, abbiamo anche dei sentimenti, ed è stato fatto una indagine molto carina, te la sintetizzo proprio in 2 parole, in un convento di suore in Germania, alimentate in parte con la biodinamica, in parte con alimenti convenzionali. Ha fatto tutte le analisi, però la cosa che mi è rimasta in mente di questa ricerca è che le suore hanno detto molto candidamente che quando mangiavano quei prodotti biodinamici, a parte che volevano quelli che erano più buoni, loro riuscivano a pregare meglio. Per come dire, è un qualche cosa che ci nutre nella nostra globalità e non solo riempie la pancia.
Let food be your medicine, and your medicine be your food. This ancient idea, forgotten in our society, where food has rather turned into poison, is then to be recovered. Cutting-edge allergy research is confirming it and focusing on pollution's manifold facets as one crucial factor at play in the global surge of allergic diseases. But if allergy protects us from external chemical threats in the modern environment, why aren't we all allergic?
Why only a fraction of people develop allergies and become so exquisitely sensitive to allergens? For social animals like humans, and humans for much of our evolutionary history we lived in small groups. For animals with this type of social structure, it may not be necessary for all members of the community to be hypersensitive to noxious environments. It may be sufficient that a fraction of the individuals may be hypersensitive to direct the rest of the group away from the suboptimal environments. This is completely speculative view, but potentially it could have something to do with explaining why only a subset of individuals have allergies. And allergic people would be a sort of a sentinels of the environment and determining how optimal or suboptimal it is.
Allergy sufferers as environmental sentinels. They may perceive and react to things that may harm all of us.
I think having a different perspective on allergy, having a perspective that is based more on evolutionary thinking, that type of perspective can help us to really understand the roots of that problem. whether the roots are in us or in our environment. And if we really get to the bottom of what allergies are all about, it may suggest a very different types of treatments.
One year has gone by since the beginning of my quest for the causes of rising trends in allergy. The swelling army of allergy sufferers is an alarm bell of the environmental risks being generated by modern industrial society, which, should we not mend our ways, may prove fatal for our species. The good news is that more and more grassroots initiatives are popping up across the world that are challenging the status quo. Databanks of toxic products and safe alternatives on the web. More and more people starting purchasing groups to buy healthier food together. Companies making green products and safe bioplastics. We, as consumers and citizens, can make them prevail. Once the immune system's evil guys, the antibodies that cause allergies may turn out to be immunological heroes. Allergy is a warning sign. It's up to us to heed it.